My name is Amber Johnson, and I was 31 years old when my engagement ended over a plate of half-eaten pasta. 4 months. That's how far away the wedding was supposed to be. The venue had been booked, invitations designed, deposits paid, honeymoon scheduled down to the hour. On paper, my life looked settled, stable, and enviably on track. I had been with Charles Leidy for 3 years, engaged for 8 months, and until that Tuesday night, I truly believed that we were building something permanent. We were sitting at the small round table in his apartment, the one he insisted felt more intimate than a dining table. Candle lit, wine poured, everything normal enough that I didn't sense the floor about to give out beneath me. He kept pushing his pasta around with his fork, not really eating, not really looking at me either. "I need to talk to you about something," he said finally. Those words landed heavy in my chest. Nothing good ever starts that way. I felt it immediately, that subtle drop in the stomach, the instinctive warning your body gives you before your mind catches up. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he continued. I didn't interrupt, I just waited. "I love you," Charles said too quickly. "I really do. But I'm not ready to marry you yet." The room seemed to tilt. I set my fork down carefully, like any sudden movement might shatter what little balance I had left. "What do you mean?" I asked. He exhaled, rubbing his hands together like he'd rehearsed this part. "I mean, I've only ever been in one serious relationship as an adult. You. And one woman back in college. I need to know if this is really what I want. If you're really the one." "We're engaged," I said slowly. "We've been planning a wedding." "I know," he replied, nodding. "And that's why I need to figure this out now, before we're legally tied together." I felt my pulse in my ears. "Figure what out?" "I want to date other people first," he said. "Just for a few months. See what else is out there." There it was. Clear. Unmistakable. I stared at him. "So you want to sleep with other women, and then decide if you want to marry me?" "Don't make it sound so crude," he snapped. "I just need to explore my options. You're the only serious relationship I've had. What if I marry you and always wonder what I missed?" The audacity of it was almost impressive. "Then break up with me," I said. "No," he replied immediately. "I don't want to break up. I just want to break." A pause. "We can still be engaged, just not exclusive for a bit." I felt something inside me go very, very still. "So let me get this straight," I said calmly. "You want an open relationship for a few months. I'm supposed to wait while you date around. And if you decide I'm good enough, we get married." "It's not like that," he insisted. "You can date too if you want. It's only fair." "I don't want to date other people," I said. "I chose you. That's what engagement means to me." He sighed, frustration creeping into his voice. "You're being close-minded. Lots of couples do this. It's healthy. My therapist even said I should be honest about my needs." That part hurt more than I expected. Not because he'd talked to a therapist, but because he'd talked to her for weeks. Planned this, thought it through, and still believed I'd just accept it. "Okay," I said. He blinked. "Okay, I understand," I replied. "Thanks for being honest." I stood, grabbed my jacket. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Home, I need to think." "But we're not done talking." "Yes, we are," I said, meeting his eyes for the first time since the conversation began. "You've made your position clear. Now I need to figure out mine." I left before he could say anything else. That was the moment everything ended. I just didn't cancel it yet. I drove home in silence, hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road like muscle memory was the only thing keeping me upright. The city lights blurred past me. Familiar streets, suddenly feeling foreign, like I was moving through a life that had already ended without bothering to tell me. I parked, went upstairs, and walked into my apartment at a little after 9. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't check my phone. I just sat on the couch and stared at the wall. For a long time, nothing happened. Then slowly the shock began to lift, not replaced by hysteria or rage, but by something colder, clearer. It was the kind of clarity that doesn't feel dramatic when it arrives. It just settles in heavy and undeniable. Charles didn't want to marry me. Not really. He wanted me on standby, a guarantee, a safe place to return to after he'd confirmed there was nothing better waiting out there. And if I agreed to that even silently, even temporarily, I would be telling him that my place in his life was conditional, optional, replaceable. That thought hardened into resolve. I picked up my phone and started making calls. First, the venue. I explained that the wedding was canceled. The coordinator was kind, almost practiced in her sympathy. She told me I'd lose the $2,000 deposit, but avoid the remaining balance. I thanked her, hung up, and wrote the number down in my notes like it was a business transaction, not the dismantling of a future I'd been building for years. Next, the jeweler. I still had the receipt. The ring had never been resized. They agreed to take it back for an 85% refund. I'd lose some money, but I'd get most of it back. It felt strange how little that bothered me. The ring had stopped being a symbol the moment Charles asked for permission to step outside the commitment it represented. Caterer, photographer, florist. One by one, the deposits disappeared. Money gone, yes, but with every cancellation, something else lifted. A weight, an expectation, a lie I would no longer have to carry. By midnight, everything was done. I had lost a little over $4,000 in deposits. I had saved myself tens of thousands more and something far more valuable than money. Then I blocked him. His number, his social media, every possible avenue of access. I changed my locks, not because I was afraid of him, but because I didn't want the illusion of shared space lingering where it no longer belonged. I sent a single message to my family and close friends. Short, controlled, honest. The wedding is off. Charles told me he wants to date other women before committing. I'm handling it. I need space. That was it. No embellishment, no defense, no apology. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The next morning, my phone lit up like a warning signal. Missed calls, voicemails, unknown numbers. I didn't listen to any of them. I didn't need to. I already knew what they would say. Confusion, regret, backtracking disguised as reflection. A week later, the knock came. I opened the door to find Melissa Charles's closest friend standing there with a tight smile and concern carefully arranged across her face. I'd seen that expression before, usually when someone had already decided you were the villain, but needed you to play along anyway. We need to talk, she said. No, we don't, I replied. She's devastated, Melissa continued, stepping forward as if proximity might soften my resolve. You blocked her. She can't reach you. That was intentional, she frowned. Don't you think you're overreacting? She was just being honest about her feelings. You're punishing her for being vulnerable. I studied her for a moment, genuinely curious how someone could twist reality so cleanly. She told me she wanted to date other women before marrying me. I canceled the wedding and moved on. That's not punishment. That's consequence. She didn't mean it like that, Melissa insisted. She was scared. Pre-wedding jitters. Then she should have said she was scared, I replied evenly. Not that she wanted to explore her options. You're being cruel. Am I asked, or am I just not agreeing to be a backup plan? Her mouth opened, then closed. I could see her recalibrating, shifting strategies. She loves you, she said softly. She made a mistake. Just talk to her. I heard everything I needed to hear, I said. Tell her to lose my number. I closed the door before she could say anything else. That night, a message came from Charles's mother. Polite, diplomatic, carefully worded concern about how upset her child was, and whether we could meet for coffee to talk things through calmly. I replied once. With respect, your daughter told me she wasn't ready to marry me and wanted to date other women. I took her seriously. There's nothing to discuss. She responded that Charles had been crying for days, that he didn't mean to break up, that he just needed reassurance. I typed back slowly. He wanted me to wait while he tested the market. I'm not interested in being someone's safety net. There was no reply after that. What struck me most wasn't the breakup itself, it was the expectation, the unspoken belief that I would negotiate my dignity to preserve his comfort, that I would chase him, convince him, prove myself worthy of being chosen. But I wasn't 21 anymore. I was 31, and I had heard him clearly the first time. I underestimated how loud silence can be when other people decide to fill it for you. The first few days after Melissa showed up at my door were oddly calm. Painful, yes, but private. I went to work, answered emails, ate meals I barely tasted, and came home to an apartment that already felt like it belonged to someone else. I told myself that was enough, that I didn't owe anyone explanations beyond the truth I'd already given. I was wrong. It started with messages from mutual friends, casual at first. Hey, just checking in. Then gradually more pointed. Are you okay? Charles is really struggling. This seems extreme. Extreme. As if calling off a wedding after your fiancé asked to date other women was some kind of impulsive tantrum rather than a rational response. One evening, a coworker pulled me aside after a meeting. I didn't want to say anything. She began carefully. But I heard you called off the wedding because Charles suggested couples therapy. I actually laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. That's not what happened, I said. Well, that's what people are saying. That was the moment I realized the story was being rewritten, and I wasn't the author anymore. According to the new version making its way around, Charles hadn't asked to date other women. He'd simply been overwhelmed. He'd wanted therapy, support, reassurance, and I apparently had panicked and disappeared. Cold, unforgiving, emotionally unavailable. I corrected people when I could, calmly, factually, no emotion attached. He asked to date other women before committing. I said no and canceled the wedding. Some nodded in understanding. Others tilted their heads, skepticism already settling in. It was easier for them to believe the softer version, the one where commitment anxiety was understandable and my refusal to accommodate it was framed as cruelty. My mother didn't hesitate. She asked for what she demanded when I told her the full story over the phone. I repeated it word for word. There was a pause. Then, "That girl has some nerve. You did the right thing." Hearing that steadied me more than I expected. Not because I needed permission, but because it confirmed what I already knew. I hadn't imagined the disrespect. I hadn't exaggerated it. I had simply responded to it. The misinformation didn't stop. One afternoon, I was cornered in the produce section of a grocery store by a woman I recognized as one of Charles's friends. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "You know he's been having panic attacks, right?" she said. I blinked. "Because of me? Because you blocked him. Disappeared. He was trying to communicate his feelings and you punished him for it." I met her gaze steadily. He communicated that he wanted to date other women. I took him seriously. He was scared, she snapped. He needed reassurance. He needed permission, I replied calmly. I declined to give it. She looked at me like I was heartless, like I was missing something obvious. "It wouldn't have been cheating if you agreed," she said. "Exactly," I said, and I didn't agree. That seemed to frustrate her more than anger ever could, as if my refusal to participate in the moral gymnastics of the situation was the real offense. "So you just decided it was over?" she pressed. "No," I corrected. "He decided it was over when he asked to step outside the commitment. I just didn't pretend otherwise." She scoffed and walked away, shaking her head. What unsettled me wasn't the confrontation, it was the pattern. Over and over, the same expectations surfaced in different forms. That I should have softened, that I should have waited, that I should have proven my love by tolerating something that made me feel small. No one asked how it felt to realize the person you planned to marry saw you as an option. They only asked why I wouldn't fight to keep him. The irony was staggering. I wasn't fighting because there was nothing to fight for. Not anymore. Love that requires self-erasure isn't love, it's fear dressed up as loyalty. And I refused to wear it. By the third week, the noise around me had reached a steady hum, persistent, irritating, impossible to ignore completely. I had stopped correcting every version of the story floating around because I was tired. Not of defending myself, but of realizing how eager people were to believe the version where I was wrong for refusing to compromise my dignity. It was easier for them that way. The real shock came on a Saturday night. I was out with a couple of friends at a bar near the stadium, the kind of place where the TVs are always tuned to whatever game is on and no one expects emotional confrontations. I hadn't planned to stay long. I just wanted background noise, something ordinary, something that didn't ask me to explain myself. Halfway through the first quarter, one of my friends stiffened beside me. "Amber," she said quietly, nodding toward the entrance. "Is that—" I looked up. Charles had just walked in with another woman. She was tall, confident, the kind of effortlessly put together that suggested intention. They didn't sit at the bar. They chose a table 2 rows over, close enough to be seen, but not close enough to be accidental. Almost immediately, I felt his eyes flick in my direction, checking, measuring, waiting for a reaction. I didn't give him one. We went back to the game, but I could feel the tension coiling across the room. 20 minutes later, he stood up and walked past our table on the way to the restroom. He slowed just slightly and stopped beside me. "Hi," he said. I looked up. "Hi. Can we talk?" I glanced toward his table. "I don't think the woman you came with would appreciate that." "She's not my date," he said quickly. "She's just a friend." I nodded. "Okay." He waited. I didn't fill the silence. "So, you're really just done?" he asked. "You're not even going to hear me out?" "I heard you 3 weeks ago," I replied evenly. "You were very clear." "I was confused," he said. "I made a mistake." "Okay." That was all I said. Not because I didn't have more words, but because none of them would change anything. "That's it," he pressed. 3 years and that's all you've got. What do you want me to say?" I asked. "You wanted to date other women. You're here with another woman. You're getting exactly what you asked for." "She's just a friend," he repeated, his voice tightening. "It doesn't matter to me either way," I said. "We're not engaged anymore." That seemed to hit him harder than anything else. His expression shifted confusion, giving way to something like panic. You're really throwing everything away because I had one moment of doubt. You didn't have doubt, I said quietly. You had a plan. You talked about this for weeks. That's not panic. That's intention. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I was wrong, he said finally. But I still love you. Maybe, I replied, but you didn't respect me. His eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I saw the version of him I'd loved, the vulnerable one, the one I used to protect. But vulnerability without accountability is just another form of manipulation. His companion approached, then clearly uncomfortable. Everything okay? She asked. We're fine, I said, standing. He was just leaving. Charles stared at me like he was waiting for permission, for forgiveness, for something. He didn't get it. As he walked away, my friends stared at me in stunned silence. That was cold, one of them said. Was it? I asked. He brought another woman to a place he knew I'd be. That wasn't an accident. That was a test. And you didn't bite, another added. No, I said. I stopped playing. Later that night, a message came through from an unknown number. You're heartless. He loved you. You'll regret this when you're alone. I blocked it without replying. What struck me most wasn't the insult, it was the expectation behind it. The belief that I should still be emotionally available to someone who had already stepped halfway out the door. That my role was to wait to hope to compete. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. 5 weeks after the dinner that ended, everything Charles showed up at my apartment. I hadn't seen him since the bar. I hadn't heard his voice. I'd managed to exist in a careful balance, functional, composed, still tender in places I didn't touch too often. I thought the worst was over, that the distance had finally taught him what my silence hadn't. I was wrong. He knocked like someone who believed persistence could substitute for permission. Sharp, urgent raps that echoed down the hallway. I ignored the first few minutes, hoping he'd leave. Then my neighbor shouted through the wall that she'd call the police if the noise didn't stop. I know you're in there, Charles called out. Please, just talk to me. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. He looked undone. Sweatpants, hoodie, hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes. The woman from the bar was nowhere to be seen, and I knew without asking that whatever he'd been trying to prove that night had failed. I'm ready now, he said the moment he saw me. I know what I want. I want to marry you. I studied him quietly. The desperation in his eyes wasn't romantic, it was transactional. He wasn't choosing me. He was returning. That's great, I said. I'm glad you figured that out. Relief flooded his face. He stepped forward. So we can start planning again. I know we lost the deposits, but we can. No, I said. He froze. What? I'm not marrying you. The words seemed to knock the air out of his lungs. But I'm ready now. I know, I replied. And I'm not. That doesn't make sense, he said, shaking his head. You loved me. I did, I said honestly. And then you showed me how you think. I made a mistake. You did, I agreed. And I made a decision based on that mistake. He laughed weakly, like this was some misunderstanding that could be talked through. You're just being stubborn. You're punishing me. I'm being honest, I said. You didn't see me as a partner. You saw me as a safety net. That's not true. You asked to shop around before committing, I replied calmly. That tells me everything I need to know. He started crying then, full, shaking sobs, promises spilled out in a rush, therapy, prenups, boundaries, anything I wanted. He would do anything he said. Anything to fix this. I want someone who never doubted they wanted to marry me, I said quietly. That's not you. That's not fair, he insisted. Everyone has doubts. Not everyone asks their fiancé for permission to date other women, I said. There's a line. His mother called the next day. She didn't bother with pleasantries. You're being incredibly cruel, she said. He admitted he was wrong. What more do you want? Nothing, I replied. I don't want anything from him. So you're just going to throw away 3 years. He did that, I said. I just made it permanent. She told me I'd regret it, that love required forgiveness, that I was too rigid. With respect, I said, before she could continue, he wasn't scared of commitment. He was scared of settling. There's a difference. She hung up, and that was the moment I felt it, the final click of closure settling into place. Not relief, not triumph, just certainty. I had done the right thing. The world didn't end after that call. It didn't even wobble. Life simply adjusted. The people who mattered most stopped asking questions once they understood the full story. Some friends drifted away quietly, choosing comfort over clarity. Others surprised me by standing closer than they ever had before. The split was almost clean, those who believed love meant endurance at any cost, and those who understood that respect was the cost of entry. 2 weeks after Charles showed up at my door, I ran into him again. It was a coffee shop near my office, one I usually avoided because it had been our place once. I almost turned around when I saw him standing in line, but something in me refused to retreat. I had already given up enough ground. He was there with Melissa, the same concerned expression on her face, like she was bracing for impact. Charles saw me immediately. His shoulders stiffened. For a moment, he looked like he might approach me. He didn't. I ordered my coffee and stood at the opposite end of the counter. When the barista called my name, Charles suddenly appeared beside me, too close, invading the space I'd fought hard to reclaim. "I'm seeing someone," he said abruptly. "Okay," I replied. "She's a lawyer," he added. "Very successful. She treats me really well." "That's great," I said. "I hope it works out." He frowned clearly, not getting the reaction he'd rehearsed. "Bet you regret your decision now." I looked at him, then really looked. The familiar face, the restless eyes, the subtle tension of someone still waiting to be chosen. "I don't," I said honestly. "I hope you're happy." "You don't mean that." "I do," I replied. "I'm not angry anymore." That seemed to throw him more than anything else. Anger, at least, would have meant I still cared in the way he wanted. Indifference wasn't something he knew how to argue with. "You did me a favor," I continued calmly. "You showed me who you were before we made a legal commitment. That's a gift." He didn't have a response. I took my coffee and left without looking back. Later, through mutual friends, I learned the truth. The lawyer had lasted less than 2 weeks. Apparently, Charles spent most of their dates talking about me, what he'd lost, what he almost had. She ended things quickly. He was back on the apps, still telling people I was the one who got away, still framing himself as the wounded party who'd been abandoned during a moment of vulnerability. Whatever helped him sleep at night. As for me, I was fine. Not euphoric, not devastated, just steady. I sold the couch he'd picked out because I hated looking at it. Repainted the bedroom. Small changes that reminded me the space was mine again. I wasn't dating yet. I didn't feel rushed to fill the silence. I was learning to sit comfortably inside it. What I learned from all of this was simple, even if it took me 31 years to truly understand it. When someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. Self-respect isn't negotiable. You can't compromise on fundamental values and call it love. Charles wanted to explore his options before committing. He was free to do that, just not with me waiting on the sidelines. People still ask if I'd take him back if he tried again. The answer is no, not because I'm bitter, not because I'm punishing him, but because he fundamentally didn't respect me enough to consider how his request would make me feel. He expected me to accept it. I deserve better than that. And now finally I know it. That wedding never happened. That relationship ended with one conversation and a month of fallout. No dramatic revenge, no screaming matches, just a woman who respected herself enough to walk